30th anniversary of Dayton Peace Agreement is something what we need to discuss extensively, and someone who knows a lot about that, but also agreements which were made during these last 30 years is Ambassador Wolfgang Petritsch, former High Representative to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Ambassador, welcome back to program N1.
Well, hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's start with the current events, and then we'll speak about 30 years ago. What we are seeing at the moment in Bosnia and Herzegovina is something interesting. There is a lot of things changing on the ground at the moment. Some are speaking about deals between Americans and the leadership of Republika Srpska, but also Milorad Dodik is not anymore the president of Republika Srpska. So how do you see the situation at the moment on the ground?
Well, I can tell you, on the one hand, a lot has changed. But on the other hand, we're still 30 years after, actually in a situation where far too little has changed. And I, of course, as the former High Representative, I always keep in mind that Bosnia-Herzegovina was the most important project, so to speak, for the international community. So comparing to the investment, both financially, but also in terms of ideas of manpower, of political engagement, the outcome after 30 years is not very impressive. Clearly, we need to also think in terms of Bosnia's destruction was the worst of the wars in former Yugoslavia. That is clear. And in many ways, the idea to re-establish the pre-war multi-ethnic society, which cannot be done from the outside, which needs to be done from the inside by the citizens of the country, has not succeeded. We're still in this frame, in this ethno-nationalistic thinking. That is, in my opinion, the biggest problem. Yeah? And there, we as the international community have to say, we have tried hard, but we have not succeeded in a way that maybe I myself, back 25 years ago, and my successor, the late Paddy Ashdown, have thought of. Our engagement at a time was really also driven by an optimism in the country itself. That I do not see today. This kind of malaise is the worst possible outcome that we see. It is not the people, it is not the readiness to do something with the common citizenry. It is really the problem of the political class. In all the parties, I should say, there's either an active working against the idea of Dayton Bosnia, or there is not enough engagement. There's not a majority that Bosnia has reached at the political level to work for a European Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is the greatest regret that I have.
Mr. Petritsch, at the moment, Bosnia and Herzegovina is stuck somewhere in a limbo between Brussels and the 1990s. And what we are seeing at the moment is that the one person is basically blocking everything by its actions, and the others are not strong enough to react to that. And that's Milorad Dodik, because his political party is blocking processes on the state level. And on the other side, we have Bosniaks and Croats who don't know how to react to that, or they have a deals with him or don't have a deals with him. How do you see this situation?
Well, I see it similarly as you have described it, but then I'm asking myself, why cannot those who oppose the road that Mr. Dodik has taken and this is they should have already a long time ago decided on a coalition of the pragmatic Bosnians. That has not happened, also due to the fact that unfortunately the HDZ is not really interested in a functioning Bosnia-Herzegovina. Here, I believe Zagreb could have done more. There, I was much luckier 25 years ago when I had to deal with Prime Minister Račan and President Mesić. We had an excellent cooperation for Bosnia-Herzegovina. You might recall that President Mesić said to the address to the Bosnian Croats, "Your capital is Sarajevo." Yeah, that is not the case any longer. On the other hand, you have the Serbs. Also, Belgrade is not engaged enough in a positive, proactive way. So Bosnia itself, and this is the weakness of the Troika, this is the weakness of the state-level institutions. There is still not a majority for a better future for Bosnia-Herzegovina. That has to change. And I think the European Union, and I can tell you that only yesterday evening I spoke with Marta Kos, enlargement commissioner from Brussels. She was in Vienna, and I addressed exactly the same issue. I said, listen, the EU has to become more active in this. We have to be more creative how to deal with a country which is still very much traumatized by the war, civil war and war of aggression from the neighbors. So that is not enough done in Brussels on the one hand, but in the end, it will be the Bosnians themselves, you know, the citizens, the politics that need to team up. That is still not happening, you know. And when I look at the EU report on Bosnia, it is the worst that I have ever read. I was really shocked to see, and a friend of mine in Bosnia, a Bosnian friend to whom I spoke only recently, he said there is 127 times in the report on Bosnia, no progress or little. Yeah, so this is a really devastating image that Bosnia is giving to the European Union, and we see this also in Austria. We were always the ones who really supported the accession of Bosnia and the rest in the Western Balkans into the European Union. It is difficult now because only a minority in Austria is still supporting accession. We need to really speed up now and change the minds. First and foremost, of course, in Bosnia, but also then in the neighboring countries like in Austria. Yeah.
Mr. Petritsch, the picture which you're painting from Vienna to us is very bleak, but if we see at the moment situation where United States are removing Milorad Dodik and SNSD from all sanctions list and doesn't give any kind of explanation why that has happened, doesn't that point you into direction to say there is some sort of the deal made with Americans which could change the politics of United States as one of the key players here in Bosnia and Herzegovina when it comes to its future?
Well, I can tell you the United States does not want to be a key player in Bosnia any longer. The Republika Srpska taxpayer has paid dearly a lot of money in order to get Dodik from the sanctions list and his cronies there. So that is something which is more a business deal. You know, this is the way this administration works. You pay and we deliver. But this is not a solution, clearly, for Bosnia-Herzegovina. But the consequence should be much more so than in ever to fully focus on Europe, on the European accession process. And I mean, I see this. There are still two laws that need to be passed. You know, we need to find, the politicians need to find a way, the Troika and HDZ and SNSD, they need to find a way to pass this two. That this is particularly close to my heart. These two legislative projects date back to when I installed and created the state-level judiciary system. Yeah, this needs to be reformed. Therefore, this is happening. So I really hope that this will happen. And then the third issue, which I see, is who is going to be the chief negotiator for the accession negotiations. And I mean, I have no.
Let me ask you about negotiator. What is your opinion? Should that be a person from Bosnia and Herzegovina, someone who's politically appointed, or someone who's expert for European Union, maybe even brought from the outside, to be just someone who will streamline that process and work how to speed up that process? Because we are seeing at the moment bickering between political parties, who's gonna have a chief negotiator and who's gonna have a position of a deputy negotiator.
Well, I know, I have followed this, and the SNSD candidate, it's a paradox that the candidate put forward by the Dodik party is indeed quite an expert, you know, but because of the political situation, obviously the Troika has decided we will not accept this candidacy, which in my opinion was not a good political idea. Why? Because the chief negotiator will depend on many other experts. From all the walks of life in Bosnia. And you're right in pointing out, I'm sure you will get any advice from outside. We have experts in Austria. I myself was in 1994 and 95. I was the director for the accession for our accession referendum in the Austrian government. So I have actually advised Zagreb 10 years later. I'm not promoting myself as a candidate for this, but what I want to say is, let's have a look at how are others doing this. You know, you should study how is Montenegro so successful. Albania. You might know from the history books where Albania was. This was in the Stone Age only 30 years ago. Yeah, and now it's a front runner to join the European Union. So it is possible to achieve this. So therefore, I think you should early on decide on a chief negotiator. You should put together a team. You should get advice from the outside, those who have recent experience how to negotiate with the European Union. And if you come up with this kind of proposal, yeah, and there the NGOs also, the intellectuals in Sarajevo, in Mostar, in Banja Luka are really challenged to come forward with pragmatic ideas. Then it would be possible. That would be the single most important achievement on the part of Bosnia.
Mr. Petritsch, when you say that Dodik was lobbying in Washington with this administration, should then be your advice, or do you think that that's a good option for others, for example, Bosniaks, no matter which political party, and Croats, for example, to start lobbying inside the EU, because you said the EU should be the key player at the moment, to have more support from them, for example, to have, I don't know, negotiations with your prime minister or chancellor in Austria, chancellor in Germany, President Macron, or anybody else who could boost that interest of Brussels for Bosnia and Herzegovina?
That would be very urgent. I tell you why. You mentioned France. There are going to be elections very soon, and unfortunately, those who are actually in favor of enlargement might lose the elections. Yeah. So you only have a small period of time to really convince Paris that they should support you, no matter which government and president is in place. Yes, I fully agree. The lobbying idea is a very good one, but I would not hire foreign lobbyists. I would do this myself. You're very good people. You need to also think in terms of there are professors, there are businessmen who have a good image, who are successful in what they are doing. They have a great credibility if they lobby for their own country. That is something which I believe could really help, particularly to address a more and more skeptical public in Austria, in Germany, and so on. That needs to be accompanied. If the chief negotiator and his or her team, if they work successfully, that in itself is already lobbying, showing, demonstrating that the Bosnians can do it. But then you need to really have a closer contact, and Foreign Minister Konakovic is doing a very good job in terms of approaching his colleagues in the European Union. But you need more than just this. You need a much broader, and if you get together, this is, of course, sounds a little bit utopian, get together Bosnian Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks. If you would have, so to speak, a lobbying troika from these three people and the others as well, not those who are ethno-nationalists, but those who feel themselves and consider themselves being citizens of Bosnia, of the state of Bosnia, this would really help. Otherwise, skepticism will become bigger and bigger. That is your greatest enemy in joining the European Union.
One more question about current events, Serbia, protests and everything, what's going on, but also the pressure on freedom of media. Our network is under pressure by President Vučić, but also from some people inside our company. How do you see that situation, and how dangerous the situation in Serbia could be for the region in entirety?
I'm very concerned. I've been following this pressure on the CNN affiliate N1 in Serbia as well as everywhere. I consider your mreža, if I may say so, extremely important for the region because you have a very professional reporting. This is what is needed. Propaganda is one thing, but a professional journalism is the backbone of an open society. And this is what we need, particularly in countries like Serbia, or of course also in Bosnia and in all the other countries as well in the Western Balkans. The European Union and the member governments have a very critical look at freedom of media. They consider this important, very important. And so therefore, we also, the European Union, which is extremely concerned about this, needs to support a free and independent media wherever it can. This is actually a condition for joining the European Union. So I think you have the support. The freedom of media is a principle in the European Union, and it needs to be told so to the governments in the region.
Let me ask you to go back to history. 30 years ago, Dayton negotiations were hard and very difficult for Americans, but for everybody else who was involved in that. You had your own taste of that a bit later with Rambouillet and everything else, what was going on with negotiations. How do you see that situation now, 30 years after? What was the biggest mistakes, and what could be done better, what was not done then?
Well, of course, when you look back in retrospect, you see what should have done better. And I had long conversations with the late Richard Holbrooke about this. Mr. Holbrooke immediately realized to accept Republika Srpska as a name in Bosnia was not a good idea. Yeah. Also, the emphasis on the ethnic principle was not a good idea. Yeah. Yes, it's a multi-ethnic country. You need collective rights, but you need above all individual rights for its citizens. That was very difficult. I remember when we tried to sort of correct data, so to speak, yeah, and bring in more civic elements into the system in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I remember when I had this big entity reform approach and negotiations with Republika Srpska and with the Federation, we really tried very hard to put forward the civic principle, the citizen at center stage. It did not succeed fully. We did get elements of the citizenry into it, but this is something which you need to work. I know that some of your parties, Naša Stranka and some others, many academics also, and normal citizens, they see this as a problem. This ethnic bias is far too strong. You know, the vital interest clause, for example, which we reduced already at the time. We limited the vital interest clause, but it's still very strong. And above all, I tell you, it is really the problem. I see not enough responsibility with the politicians in Bosnia to do the right thing. You know, they are being paid for the job that they are doing, and they are not doing their job. They are individuals, there are always exemptions, but this is a minority. How to achieve this, I don't know. Next year's elections will probably be the ones where Mr. Dodik will fade out. Yeah, he still has, of course, he's the president of his party, but this will all come to an end. Yeah, but I tell you, the problem is really it takes too long. Yeah. I've given the French example before. The opinions in the European Union can change. Marta Kroes is a very engaged commissioner, I should say, yeah, but she needs support. And the only support you can give, the most important one is appoint a chief negotiator, appoint an excellent expert team, yeah. Ask for assistance from the Council of Europe to I don't know where, individual governments, and then move forward. And I think you need to find a way to convince some of the in Republika Srpska to support this. Republika Srpska is a poor, ever more poor entity, you know. Also in the federation, it could go much, much, much better, you know. So you see, these are the things that you, as in Bosnia, can do yourself. You need to first change, and then the EU and we will help.
Mr. Petritsch, thank you so very much for your time and for this conversation.
Thank you. Hvala.